All right. So it's very nice to have you here. And over the last several weeks, I have been sharing with you what I believe are the most valuable, most important uh, pieces of knowledge and the practical tools that I believe support that knowledge and allow you to actually integrate that knowledge for yourself so that you can experience the benefits of that. Uh, Specifically, this is knowledge about yourself and knowledge that can help you to experience life in the way that you would like to, in your heart. Uh, Really, I would say in the way that life is optimally meant to be experienced, which would be with harmony, peace, sense of freedom, empowerment, happiness, love. And this is possible for anybody who is really sincere and who is ready to actually apply themselves to what it is that I'm sharing. So it's not complicated. In fact, it's really quite simple in many respects. You don't have to have a PhD for any of this. You don't have to uh, have knowledge of the latest and greatest of, to trauma theory and somatic practices and psychological philosophies and so forth. None of that is required because this is all just about knowing yourself. And this is something that is uh, somewhat surprisingly overlooked, despite the fact that it really is strikingly obvious once you realize it. Um, so this is, to me, this is the best news. It's the most important news because you have the ability to choose how you live. You have the power to end suffering in your life. You have the power to bring about harmony within yourself and in your relationships. You have the uh, power to perceive and experience and align yourself with all abundance, goodness, and real health. Real health. I mean, this is not just having six-pack abs, as I often halfway joke. This is not about how many miles you can run or how much weight you can lift or how good you look in your beach outfit or any of the rest of that. This is about having uh, a sense of fundamental okayness. Because if you notice, most likely the way that you've lived most of your life up to now, and certainly the way that most people seem to be living their lives, and the way that society teaches us, and what's normalized is to have this underlying anxiety, chronic anxiety. And I call it anxiety. It could manifest as something that you would immediately recognize as anxiety, or maybe for some people it shows up as frustration, anger, resentment, but it's all the same energy. It's all based on not knowing who you are, not knowing what you really want, and not knowing your powers. If you don't know any of those things, then there's nothing that anything or anyone else can do for you, really, except for just continue to encourage you to just keep doing what society has already taught you to do, which is just to entangle yourself more in the suffering and hopelessness. So that's why, to me, this is the most important news because you don't have to continue in that old way. It's actually possible to leave that behind. And as I've said several times already today, and as I say many times, it's really about self-knowledge. It's about knowing directly, not theoretically, but through your actual direct experience right now, immediately, what your powers are, how it is that you create your experience, how it is that you've been creating the experience that you don't want, and then discovering how you can, number one, stop doing that. And then really from that point forward, it's just about allowing your yourself to express. See, a lot of the time, the popular ideas that are promoted about fulfillment or happiness are, in my view, fundamentally flawed. And I think you'll probably have to agree with that once you recognize what it is that I'm pointing to. Because how on earth could anyone or anything outside of you know anything about fulfillment or happiness for you, as though fulfillment and happiness were some sort of objects out there that somebody else could know about? It's not like that. It's a completely subjective thing. Fulfillment is not something that can be had out there. Fulfillment is the natural consequence of knowing yourself, knowing what you want, and knowing your powers so that you can use your powers in alignment with what you really want. And that equals fulfillment. Fulfillment is not an object that's had. Fulfillment is just the name for that alignment. When you are naturally aligned with who you are and what you want, and you know how to use your powers in that way, fulfillment is the inevitable consequence. That's just exactly what it is. And the same with happiness, real happiness. So there's nobody and nothing outside of you that can know what that is for you. No possibility, no way. And so the ready-made templates that we've been sold and that we eagerly accept and chase after cannot ever give us that. There's no possibility of it. And I'm sure you will recognize what those things are as soon as I point them out, because if you just see if you can guess. I mean, just take a look and notice, what does society teach you you need in order to have happiness and fulfillment? It's the things I joke about. You need the Ferrari, you need the six-pack abs, you need the adoration and approval of everybody, you need other people to love you. This is what society teaches us. We need material security. And there's never enough of it. Haven't you noticed? The person who's in debt by $50,000 and the person who has $50 billion, neither of them has enough, according to them, not enough for the real happiness and fulfillment that deep down they long for. That should be a clue. Now, I'm not saying that money might not make things easier. Certainly might. So I'm not discouraging anybody from having money or even desiring money. But I'm making the point that the things that society has given us as uh, these false idols to worship and chase after cannot ever deliver on the promise. So the and the reason why is as exactly as I've explained, because nobody has any ability to know anything about who you are except you. You're the only one. Therefore, you are the only one who can know what happiness and fulfillment actually is for you and what that will look like when it's expressed uniquely through and as you. You are the only one. Now, other people might be able to uh, recognize the something about it when that happens. They might say, "Wow." They might take note. You might say that there's something about that person that's different. But in advance of that, nobody can tell you, nobody can predict and say, you know what you should do. You know what you should want. You know what will give you happiness. Nobody can know that. That's something that emerges, that clarity emerges through you, through number one, the recognition of who you are, what you want, and your powers, and then allowing yourself and trusting in that alignment and expression through you. Because, and here's where this is the point I was making, or that I started making a moment ago, is that society teaches you that you should chase after certain things. And so most of us chase after those things. And so we're accustomed to this idea of this efforting, this strain, as though if we could just try hard enough, then we would finally, we would break through to the promised land. If I just have to keep trying harder and harder and harder. And if I eventually am a good little boy or a good little girl and I've tried hard enough and I chase after the right things, then I'll be rewarded and I'll finally get the happiness. I'll finally get the fulfillment. This is the lie that's been sold to us. And to the degree that people believe that lie, then they suffer. Because the truth is that the real happiness and fulfillment comes not as a result of receiving something from outside of yourself. It's not something that is attained or obtained through effort and strain. It's actually the emergence, the natural expression of you. And that is not something that is going to happen, certainly not any faster or any better because you are straining and efforting and trying. Now, I want to make one point clear here because I know some people will misunderstand this and they'll think, oh, well, Joey's saying that I should just never get out of bed. I should just lie around all day. If I just lie around all day, then uh, then I'll be happy and fulfilled. I'm not saying that. Just want to be clear. I'm not arguing that action is problematic. Not at all. I'm just saying that the action, there's a subtlety that most people overlook. Action is coming from either this idea that has been taken on from outside, that there's something that I need out there that I need to chase after, that I need to work hard to get. or the action is emerging naturally as an authentic expression of you. That doesn't mean that the action will always be something, if you're allowing it to be the natural action that emerges as your authentic expression. That does not mean that that action will always be something that you will experience in the way that you presently think of things that are easy and pleasurable. May or may not be. But but where it comes from and the qualities of it and the results that it produces are very different than the actions that are driven by chasing after something outside based on external ideas. Because one of those types of actions is stemming from fundamental self-ignorance, and the other is emerging as the natural expression of self-knowledge. So today, now that I've gotten that preamble out of the way, that will filter out, I think, all the people who are not sincere. It's not a conscious, oh, it's not a conscious effort on my part. But it does serve that purpose. I know, the people who will watch us on YouTube who are just scrolling through to the next thing, hoping, praying for some kind of entertainment or distraction that will promise them instantaneous enlightenment, will not have stuck around this long, which is too bad for them. But this is the third installment in this series. So the first, and this is what I'm going to share with you today is what I perceive is probably the third highest priority, most important piece of knowledge in regard to all of this. So in the first part in this series, I shared with you about the fundamental importance of self-knowledge, and I provided you with a really simple yet remarkably powerful practical tool that you can use in order to cultivate that. And I said then, and I'll say it now too, that I really believe that that is, if you did only one thing, uh, that would be my number one recommendation. If you don't do that, then I think you put yourself at a disadvantage, because everything else will work much better if you're working with that knowledge. And that was the video that I published on YouTube some roughly 2 weeks ago. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. I might be slightly off on that, but I think it was about 2 weeks ago. Then last week, I shared with you what I perceive as the second most valuable knowledge in this regard, which has this knowledge that I'm sharing with you, from my point of view, it has the ability to completely transform your life. This is, by the way, this is not a get rich quick scheme. This is a get rich slowly scheme. And I point that out because people are looking for get rich quick. And if you're thinking incorrectly, if you're thinking that what it is that will help you is something that will give you an instantaneous big experience, a dramatic experience, if that's the measure that you're using to determine whether something is valuable or not, then you will probably most likely determine the things that I'm sharing with you are not valuable. because they're unlikely to give you that instantaneous, big, dramatic experience. They could, but if you're lucky, they won't. Because, and I say that, I mean, whatever, at any, as you've probably heard me say before, I believe that everything that happens for the greatest good. So if you happen to have a big dramatic experience, I will assume that it is for your greatest good. But usually having a big dramatic experience is an unnecessary and, in my view, undesirable distraction, which can overly complicate matters. For those who are mature enough, who've had enough suffering in life and have tried to get rich quick enough times and failed ultimately and experienced enough disappointment and discouragement and pain and frustration, and you've had enough of that, then uh, you probably can appreciate what I'm suggesting here, which is if you are willing to just integrate this these suggestions into your daily life in a sustainable way, then you will see remarkable, very significant, life-altering, positive changes that continue to compound and grow over time. It starts out usually slowly, and it continues in a relative sense to be slow growth, but it compounds. And the power of that is uh, really mind-blowing. So, for those who are willing to work with this knowledge and the practical suggestions consistently, sincerely, in a way that is sustainable for you, my belief is, which is why I'm making the recommendations, is that you will be very pleased with the results. But it might take some time. It's not an overnight thing, usually. Again, I can't say it won't be, but it's statistically unlikely. So I really encourage you to just commit to working with this knowledge. And as I say, on a consistent and sustainable basis for you. So sustainable is relative to you. It's for some people working with some of these practical suggestions for 5 minutes a day would be quite sustainable, and for other people, 5 minutes is not going to be sustainable. They might be able to work with this knowledge for 1 minute a day, and that could be sustainable. Other people will say, I think I could do it for half an hour a day, and that might be sustainable for them. But you can't compare yourself to somebody else and expect that that's going to give you good results. Instead, no surprise, because it's about self-knowledge, you've got to know yourself. So I really, it's remarkable to me how the very process of learning how to start to work with and integrate this knowledge itself reflects the it's like it's sort of like a fractal. It's holographic in a way because the process itself it is revealing uh so much about yourself because you have to begin to know yourself enough to know what is sustainable for you, and you have to start to be humble and honest enough to start there. Because as you've probably also heard me say, you can only really start where you are. I like the image, and I like images because the images can uh, make it easier to remember things. So I like the image of those those maps that are usually on big boards at like amusement parks and things of that sort. Not that I'm advocating for amusement parks, but I have been to them in my life where uh, it will have a big indicator and it will say, "You are here." And I like that image because if you think about it, you can only that reflects this idea of you can only start where you are. I mean, if you think about if you're why does the map say you are here? because you need to know where you're starting from. The map doesn't do you any good if you don't know where you're starting from. So we always have to first identify where we're starting from. That's a big part of the process, a big part of the learning process. The process of self-knowledge is learning, where am I? Forget for a moment about who am I? What about where am I? Where am I in this process? Where am I in this willingness and capacity for even becoming knowledgeable of myself, even beginning to start to recognize who I am? I need to know, where am I in that? Because if I try to bite off more than I can chew, it won't work. That's not sustainable. Doing something in a really big way once is far, far, far less likely to give you any real meaningful benefits versus doing something in a very small way consistently. Because no matter how big of a chunk you can take on one time, the compound effects of working with some very, very, very small thing consistently, daily, in the long run, it absolutely eclipses anything you could possibly do in a big way once. It's like if you wanted to train yourself to lift heavy things, you could you could try to lift really heavy things very intensively one time. Probably not going to do you much good. You might hurt yourself. But if you just started with what you can lift now and you find what's the edge, what's the, like my one rep max. What's my one rep max? And then consistently train and grow. Then over time, it's not going to happen in one day, 1 week, 1 month, maybe not even 1 year. But as long as you're training consistently, that one rep max is going to grow and grow and grow. And in a similar way with self-knowledge, you have to know where you're starting from. It's like the one rep max. What can I sustain? Is it 1 minute? 5 minutes? And it's not just about time. I'm just using time as one metric, but it's really not just about time. Don't think that time is the most important factor, but it is a factor because a lot of times people think more time is better, and then they try to do something in this really big, long marathon way, and then they burn out, and then they just leave it, and they don't really get any real results that way. So find what you can do on a consistent basis daily, even if it's 1 minute, even if it's 30 seconds, even if it's 2 seconds. Shocking, I know, but even 2 seconds every single day over time is going to make a big difference. And if you don't believe me, if you want to call bullshit on that, then prove it. Prove it. You work with the things that I've suggested. Even for just 2 seconds a day, do that consistently for 1 year. I've lost everybody right there. 1 year, you say? Well, do the math on that. 365 days in a year, 2 seconds, 700, 730, if I've done the math correctly, 730 seconds. What is that? I don't know. It's only a handful of minutes. It's only a handful of minutes in 1 year's time. How much Netflix do you watch in a year? A hell of a lot more than that, I'm willing to bet. So prove it. And if you won't do a year, do 6 months. Take me up on the challenge. If you want to call bullshit on it, 2 seconds a day, consistently, sincerely, for 6 months. and then come back and tell me that I was wrong. And you won't be able to do it. You won't be able to tell me I'm wrong because one of two things will happen. One is you'll give up and then you can't tell me anything about it because you didn't do it. The other possibility is you'll actually do it and you'll come back in 6 months and you'll have to admit, holy shit, my life has changed. I know so much more about myself. I'm so much more empowered than I was, even with just 2 seconds. I'm not saying 2 seconds is optimal. I'm just saying, even just 2 seconds. And if you say, what could I do in 2 seconds? Well, go back and review what I talked about last week. And just notice you could do at least some of that in 2 seconds a day. And if you just did that much, your life would change. It has to, I promise. And the amazing thing is, like, from where you are now, you probably can't understand how that would happen. But once you do it, you would come back 6 months from now and you would be able to describe to me in so much detail about all of the mechanisms of how it works because you would know that directly through your own experience, not because you read a bunch of books, not because you watched a bunch of YouTube videos of so-called experts, but because you actually know it directly through your own experience. That's the power that even 2 seconds a day offers. Okay. Now I've filtered out everybody else. I was planning on getting right to it today, but I haven't done that yet. I guess I had all of this seemed important to clarify, which it is, because if you really want to be able to make use of what it is that I'm sharing here, this is all prerequisite knowledge. And by the way, I mean, somebody left a comment on the video last week saying, well, and I get these comments every once in a while. And to paraphrase, the essence of these comments is, uh, you just blah, blah, blah for so long, and your essential message could be summed up in just a few seconds. Why do you just go on and on about it? And the answer to that is because, listen, how nice would that be? Uh, I naively thought that when all of this first came to me, uh, like 13-ish years ago, I thought, oh my goodness, how does everybody not know this? How does everybody not know this? This is gonna change everybody's life. And I wrote some books about it, and they were short books. And I thought, these are going to become instantaneous overnight bestsellers because they're gonna be like, so that people are going to have their minds blown and they're going to change their lives and they're going to tell everybody else about it and the whole world's going to change. Uh, but it doesn't work like that. Uh, so this knowledge is not something that you get the AI summary of it, and then you like the light bulb goes on, and then you say, oh, hallelujah, my life has changed. Oh, oh, now I get it. No, it's not like that. This is something that you have so much resistance to because your whole life you have been trained by society in a totally different direction. You have, like the rest of us, we've got so much baggage and garbage that we have inherited from society and that we have wrongly accepted as truth, where we have sourced our goodness, our happiness, and all knowledge and authority outside of ourselves. So much so that, number one, we can't even hear the message. And number two, even when we hear it, we don't believe it. And then when we think, oh, now I understand it, we have only begun to understand the smallest fraction of it. So this is not like yes, God, that would be so nice just to be able to deliver the message once and everybody would just get it and the world would change and we would all be happy from here on out. Wouldn't that be nice? But it just does not seem to work that way. Not yet. So, takes some patience. And if you think the amount of time that it takes to listen to me blab requires patience, then uh, you're in for you're in for some revelation because the amount listening to me blab, as unpleasant as I'm sure that is requires very little patience compared to the amount of patience it takes in order to actually be with yourself. It's so much easier to listen to somebody else make noise, but to actually be with yourself, to be quiet enough, to be gentle enough, to be patient enough, to be loving enough, to be caring enough, to be with yourself. That's that's the bigger challenge for most of us. So maybe consider yourself blessed that you at least have the distraction of listening to somebody else blab for a little bit. So now I can get to it 40 minutes in. So here's third most valuable piece of knowledge. I debated a little bit. I thought, first most important seemed pretty clear cut. Second, fairly clear cut. Third, I it came to me intuitively immediately, and I'm just going to go with it. But then I was thinking, I don't know, is that there's other things that are also pretty important. Are they fourth most important? So it might be a little bit of a gray area, but I'm this is up there, if not third most important. It's tied for third, let's say. And this is something that I'm going to share with you today, which I myself only learned about starting about 6 years ago, and which, like some of the other things that I've shared, like the things I shared last 2 weeks, uh, on the surface might seem so ridiculously simple, trivial, that you might be tempted to dismiss it. You might be tempted to think, how could that be of any value? That's so simple. That's so stupid. It won't help me at all. But like, like with the other things, I challenge you. Put it to the test sincerely, consistently, even just a small amount, and then come back and tell me because I have a very high degree of confidence that if you do it, you will be very pleasantly surprised. So here it is. There is a process, an internal process by which you produce all of your experiences. So so even the word experience is uh, it is a spell that casts a hypnotic trance upon us because it suggests that there is something there, that there is some kind of thing, because it's a noun, an experience, an experience. But actually, that's not true. That's not true. No, there are no things. There are no. nouns. It's just that, I mean, there are nouns in speech, grammatically, there are nouns, but there is no such thing as a thing. So when we say an experience, say I am having an experience, or I am experiencing fill in the blank, whatever you're experiencing. This suggests, because then we say I am experiencing, and then the name of the experience. I am experiencing happiness. I am experiencing anger. I am experiencing abundance. I am experiencing whatever. It suggests to us, it casts this spell, it hypnotizes us, and then we think, ah, there's this thing. There's this thing called an experience. There's this thing called happiness. There's this thing called anger. There's this thing called insecurity. There's this thing called abundance. But it's not true. What's actually true, and I'm inviting you to actually notice this, to observe for yourself and notice what's actually true, is that there is a process. There's a process. Even what you call your body, you say, well, my body is a thing. No, it's not. Your body's a process. It's a process. It's a very sophisticated, complex process. So all things are processes. And your what we call experience is a process. So you can apply what I'm going to share, or what I'm starting to share here, with any form of experiencing. Uh, you can do this with what you consider to be pleasant and pleasurable. You can also do this with what you consider to be unpleasant, unpleasurable, painful, frustrating, difficult, and so forth. I can't tell you that doing it with one category is better than the other category. I will tell you that I have mostly done this, and mostly personally worked with it in regard to the types of experience that I would consider to be unpleasant or undesirable. So that's my bias, because that's how I've worked with it. But I welcome you to try it out however you are intuitively drawn, and then you can let me know your results. So you can start to notice that all of what you would consider to be experience is a process, and it's an internal process. You create your experience. You are creating your experience through internal processes. So it doesn't just come to be. It's sort of like you think about, how did your body come to be? Because I said a moment ago, your body is a process. So how did it come to be? Didn't just appear, didn't just pop into, you know, there you go. It's not like that. So you were, your body was born from your mother, but it's not like that was this sudden event either. I mean, that was part of a process, right? Like roughly 9 months of gestation. So there's a process going on. So, to somebody who is, I think oftentimes, I've heard it said that, uh, by sometimes there's this thing that mothers and fathers often report, which is that the oftentimes fathers report that for them the baby, like, they had an idea, they understood the baby, there's a baby, the baby's coming, but the baby's not entirely real for them until the baby is born. But the mother often will report that the baby was very real for her for a much longer time, because she was experiencing the the baby long before giving birth. So there, the mother is often very aware of that process that's developing. So each experience is like that. There's a certain threshold at which we become aware of it. So, like that uh, sort of stereotypical uh, father experience of the baby that I just mentioned, where the father will often report that they weren't really aware that the baby didn't become fully real for them until they saw and held the baby. So it's sometimes like that for us, where we're mostly consciously unaware of the process until there's a certain threshold. And then all of a sudden it hits us and we say, oh, what is this? And then we say, oh, I'm angry, or oh, I'm afraid, or oh, I'm happy. So there's a threshold at which we become conscious of the process. And that further lends itself to this illusion that it's not a process, that it's a thing. So both the way we think about it, the way we talk about it, the way we imagine it, and our actual conscious awareness of it all combine to reinforce this spell where we think, oh, it's a thing, and it just came on me out of nowhere. And then we'll look around sometimes to the circumstances and look to those to blame them. We're like, well, gee whiz, I don't know where this came from. Well, look, that person's over there. They must be the one that caused it. I mean, they were in the room when I started feeling angry. It must be that they caused me to feel angry. So we make the mistake, several layers of mistake here. One is that we don't recognize that our experience is a process. We don't recognize that it is an internal process. We don't recognize that it is an internal process that we are creating. And we don't realize that uh, that process was was initiated long before we became consciously aware of the consequences. And as a result of all of that, are we feel disempowered. We blame circumstances, conditions, and other people, or or conversely, we same basic process, but we source the cause of our experience outside of ourselves, for good or for bad. If we like the experience, we say, "Oh, I depend upon these circumstances or these people for my happiness, for my love, for my joy." And then this sets us up for the problems down the line, because then we say, well, oh no, what will I do when that person or the circumstances aren't here? How can I be happy? How could I experience love if they're not here? So sourcing the causes of our experience outside of ourselves is just a setup for problems. Uh, Now, you can become aware, of course, it's possible to become aware of the processes, the internal processes by which your experiences are being generated, uh, the it, at a subtler and subtler and subtler level in the moment. And this, in many ways, might be ideal, because then if something is uh, going in a direction that you don't like, you can catch it much sooner, which gives you much greater leverage to produce change. So leverage is a really important idea you've probably heard me talk about. Uh, and this is connected to what I was just talking about in terms of the threshold. So if you don't become aware of the process until it's crossed a threshold where it's like smacking you in the head like a 2x4, that's a difficult position to be in because you have very little leverage. Sort of like That's sort of like trying to deal with an avalanche. It's not, you don't have a lot of leverage there. Um, not to say it's impossible, because nothing's impossible, but it's not ideal. You're really not setting yourself up for success if you don't become aware of something until it's crossed that threshold where there's pretty much no way you could not know about it. So it's to your benefit to become aware of things, ideally in real time at subtler levels, because that gives you more leverage. What I mean is this. I'll give you an example. Okay. Uh, let's say that a person has been invited to a social event, uh, and there's there's something in them that there's some inner resistance, doesn't want to go to this event, but then they're thinking, well, I should go. It's going to be, it's a good opportunity for this reason, that reason. I don't want to disappoint other people. I don't want to miss out on opportunities, whatever. So they decide to go. They decide to, and not consciously, but unconsciously, they decide to try and overpower through force of will any resistance to this. So now they have this inner conflict, but they're using their willpower to try and dominate the conflict within themselves. So they start to feel tension. They start to feel unpleasantness. But it's all happening unconsciously. And then they day of the event, and it's just continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And on the way to the event, they're starting to actually notice consciously a little bit of the discomfort and tension, and they're starting to think, oh, gee, maybe, I don't know, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. I wish that I had a good excuse not to go. But they don't see any good excuse, so they continue along the way. And then when they get there, let's say they have some kind of blowout with somebody, big dramatic blowout with somebody, and they say, that person has caused me to be so angry. So at that point, then, the rest of the evening is ruined for them, and probably the rest of the week, for most people, might be weeks, just ruined, where they're just stewing in this misery and upset. So that's the avalanche that I'm talking about. When it gets to that point, and the person doesn't even consciously become aware of it until after it's hit them, and then they're just looking out there for who to blame and what to blame. And then they're just going to be reeling from the consequences of that for a significant amount of time. And they'll never actually resolve the matter in that way until they actually start to get clearer within themselves about how they create this experience for themselves. So those continue to play out that same pattern over and over and over. And this is familiar to you, if not that exact pattern. What I'm saying is it's familiar. It has to be familiar to you if you really start to be honest with yourself that there are many of these patterns that play out in your life. And each time you make the mistake of thinking once it, you know, this is unrelated to anything else. Once this calms down, I'll be okay. And then you go about your business, and then the same pattern plays out again. Different people, different cast of characters, but the same thing plays out. And this is because nothing fundamentally has changed in you in terms of how you produce these experiences. You are continuing to produce the experiences, but you're not aware of it. But you could become aware of it. So in this example, notice how different it would be if, when the person is invited to this event, what if they immediately noticed the inner conflict? This goes back to what I was, in some ways, this is connected to what I was sharing last week. but it requires the subtlety of awareness to notice, oh, there's a there's a conflict I'm experiencing within, and to have the uh, self-awareness and the honesty and the gentleness and the patience and the self-care to recognize that trying to override this, trying to push through, is only doing violence to myself. Nobody wins in this configuration, so let me do it differently. Instead, let me actually become aware of what's going on inside and let me allow for a harmonious resolution instead of trying to dominate and exerting my will. We're going to the event whether you like it or not. So being able to intervene or make a change at that point gives you much more leverage because now it's very subtle. There's not all this momentum built up. It doesn't have to reach this breaking point. And you can recognize at that very moment, well, this is within me. This isn't somebody else's fault. Like I just got a invitation in the mail. It can't be the fault of the invitation. The reason I'm experiencing this inner conflict is just because I have some kind of competing strategies within me. Let me just actually become aware and invite more awareness of that so that I can find a harmonious resolution. It's as simple as that. So that gives you much more leverage. Now, that, as I say, would be ideal to be able to be aware in real time at that level of subtlety. But as I said earlier, we have to start where we are. So if you don't already have that level of subtlety of awareness, what are you going to do? You cross your fingers and have wishful thinking. Oh, it will be different. It's not going to be any different unless you set the intention and consistently apply yourself to growing that subtlety of awareness. So I'm going to share with you a profoundly simple yet incredibly powerful way that you can not only achieve greater subtlety of awareness in real time so that you can start to produce those changes in real time, but also simultaneously, you can begin to retroactively learn from the things that you had where you had not previously been aware of the subtlety of what was going on inside. And this is how you do it. And I'll invite you to do it with me right now so that you can actually experience it. And then I'll give you a specific suggestion about how you could practically put this into practice and integrate it into your daily life so that you could continue to grow the benefits of this in your life. So to have the experience of it now, reflect back over the last 24 hours and just notice some non-optimal experience, something where you felt angry, resentful, depressed, frustrated, fearful, anxious, whatever it might be. And if somehow you can't think of any non-optimal experience over the last 24 hours, you can go back further if you want. Uh, Now, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Could be big, it could be small. It's up to you, whatever. Just think of something over the last 24 hours or longer, if necessary, where you would consider that to be a non-optimal experience. And I want you to then, in your mind, go back as far as you need to go back before where you would say that you were not experiencing any of that non-optimal experience. In other words, where you go back as far as you need to go back before that you became aware of the non-optimal experience, the anger, the resentment, the fear, whatever it is, whether that's seconds or minutes or hours, where you would say, I was feeling all right. I was feeling good. I was feeling fine, at least in regard to that. Okay. And then I want you to, in your mind, slowly play that forward and notice, be just pay attention. At what point did you first start to notice the beginnings of that non-optimal experience? And at that very moment, just like pause and notice what was happening there. How did that start? What triggered it? And notice that that whatever it was that triggered it, whether it was something that you saw or something that you heard, notice that whatever you saw or you heard or tasted or smelled or whatever it was, that that thing itself was not a problem. That by itself was not a problem. If you really just isolate it to that thing, that was not a problem. But notice, what did you do immediately following that internally that you began to experience as a problem? So so there was something that happened, whatever it was the weather. You heard something on the news. Your spouse gave you a look. You got a phone call and somebody said something. You got an email. The you got a bill, whatever it was. Something something triggered it. That was not in and of itself a problem. That was just something that you saw or heard or tasted or smelled or whatever it was. But then immediately following that, internally, you did something. You remembered something, you thought something, you imagined something. There's something that you began to do inside of yourself that started the process of turning this into a problem of some kind. And then notice what happened immediately after that, internally. And just as slowly as necessary, identify the sequence of things that you were doing internally. Just things that you were imagining, remembering, thinking, telling yourself, internal actions, tensing up, resisting. And it just continues to snowball if you just pay attention. You, one thing, then the next thing, then the next thing. It's a sequence of internal things, becomes a process, and eventually it results in this crossing this threshold where you became aware and you said, oh, I have this problem, whatever it was, whether it was anxiety or frustration or anger or resentment or depression or whatever it was. But there was this process that started internally before that, whether it was seconds before or minutes before. And you don't have to become aware of every single little detail. You just have to become aware of enough of it that, and especially early enough in the process, the sooner you can become aware of the process in the sequence, the better, because that gives you more leverage. And then just notice what other options are available to you. I mean, if you think about all the different things that you could be thinking, imagining, remembering, the ways, the meanings that you could be assigning to this, of all the things, surely there have to be a lot of other possibilities other than the one that you unconsciously chose. And the one that you unconsciously chose, you know, does not give you the results that you want. Now, the way that you chose unconsciously is familiar to you. It's practiced. It's what you learned from society. It's what you've been doing probably for years, decades. But when you become aware that A, it is an internal process, it's not something that's being done to you, it's something you're doing. And B, it results in something that you don't like. And C, that there are other options, then it usually naturally begins to happen that you start to consider some of those other options. You start to try some of them out and you start to realize, well, gee, some of these actually give better results. Now, I can't tell you for sure what those other options are that will be better for you, but I can maybe suggest that generally speaking, uh, overlaying past failures onto present occurrences doesn't usually give optimal results. Usually, tensing up and resisting does not give optimal results. And usually, uh, cutting yourself off from other options doesn't give optimal results. So, just you might want to consider uh, just letting go, remaining open-minded, and telling the truth that you don't actually know what any of this means. You don't know what any of the things mean. You don't know what will happen. You don't know what other people mean. You don't know what other people feel. You don't know what, you know, you can't predict with 100% accuracy what other people will do. So it actually would probably benefit you just to keep an open mind to other possibilities. So I think usually the more you're willing just to continue to remain open instead of collapsing this into something that's familiar and predictable, the more better options will present themselves to you. And the more it will dissolve the old habits of self-harm. So now, uh, that that process, which I've just guided you through, which is that you can reflect back on some non-optimal experience that you've had. And then in your mind, you can go back and review to discover what was the internal process by which you created that non-optimal experience, even though you were not previously conscious of it. You can become conscious of it now. See, all of that knowledge is there in you. All the information is there. It just wasn't conscious, but it can be made conscious. This is an amazing thing. It's all the information is there. All you have to do is be willing to ask and investigate. Just look, and it will reveal itself. You can become aware of how you created that, and then you can, through that awareness of the process that you use to create the experience that you don't want, as long as you remain open, you can start to discover other better options. And as you become aware of those other options, what starts to happen automatically, you don't have to really try. It just happens automatically is as you become aware of those options, you're starting to very quickly and automatically try them out. Again, you don't have to try consciously. You don't have to tr try to force yourself here. I'm saying just by becoming aware of other options instantaneously, in the very moment that you're becoming aware of them, you're also, let's say, subconsciously trying them out. And those which give you better results or are likely to give you better results, you're already trying them out. You're already rehearsing them. And so those which are better options for you, your subconscious will recognize them. And now, because it's recognized them and it's already tried them out, and you know that this is, at least subconsciously, this is more likely to give you better outcomes, this is already beginning to change things because now you have this experience, even though just in your imagination and only the one time, of a different option that gives you better results, which therefore you're much more likely to automatically begin to make use of when you encounter similar situations in the future. Now, if you have followed all of that, it what I'm about to suggest, I think, will come as no surprise to you because I think it pretty much just is the obvious next step. And this is what I'm recommending as a simple, practical thing that you can do. And many of you have heard me make this recommendation before. I don't know about many. Those who participate in my programs will have heard me, I'm pretty sure, make this recommendation because I've made this recommendation a lot within the programs. I recommend that you uh, explore this simple, practical thing that I've just guided you through consistently every day. And it doesn't take long. You could do this in less than a minute. You do not need to take a long time with this. Remember what I said earlier. The 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 power of compounding effects is mind-boggling. It's a mistake to think I need to strain and try really hard and have some kind of big dramatic experience. I need to have a breakthrough experience. I'm going to strain and try to do this until I have some kind of amazing experience. I don't care if it takes me an half an hour or an hour or 2 hours. I'm going to do it. And then you exhaust yourself and then you say, God, I don't ever want to do that again. That was terrible. And then you didn't really get any benefit. But if you do this, what I've suggested, every day, and you don't take long with it. You could do it in maybe 1 minute. You could maybe do it in 30 seconds. You could maybe do it in 10 seconds. When you get really good at it, you could even get it down to 2 seconds. Might be, you might set yourself up for more success if you gave yourself at least 30 seconds to start. But even that is just a suggestion. If 30 seconds seems like too much to you, then start with less. When you do this consistently, what happens is, as I've already suggested, you are becoming aware of, number one, you're proving to yourself directly, or I should say, revealing directly to yourself that You are creating your experience through internal process, that none of these things are being done to you. So you'll stop believing that you're a victim of anything and anyone. They'll just happen. It's not because you're trying to form that belief or because you took it on because somebody else told you and it seems like a good idea or whatever. You actually demonstrate that directly to yourself. Secondly, uh, you become aware of the specific process by which you create the experiences that you don't like. Number three, you start to uh, explore other options so that you don't have to, you're no longer compelled just out of habit to do it the old way. You start to encounter new options, other ways that you could think about it, other ways that you could remember things, other ways that you could imagine things, other sequences, other ways that you could respond, maybe by being relaxed, open. And by becoming aware of those other options, automatically your subconscious is trying them out, and those which give you better results, or at least are which are more likely to give you better results, your subconscious will recognize and be much more likely to automatically start to choose those options in the future instead of the old options which give you results that you don't want. And so, as if that wasn't enough, hopefully you can recognize the power of that. In addition to that, this also helps you to become aware of the subtleties so that that will start to happen in real time, which then just makes this whole process that much faster. Because think about if every time you are beginning to uh, start a process internally that leads to undesirable outcomes, you become aware of that in real time and you immediately begin to explore new options. Think about when I talked about the compounding effect. Think about how fast that com the how short and frequent the compounding interval is then. Because if that's happening once a day, it's already really powerful. And that's what I'm suggesting, just once a day. Just once a day, the math on this is that if you were to only get a 1% improvement, and I think you get significantly more than that, but even if you got just a 1% improvement in terms of your internal process every day, then in 1 year's time, you will, I believe the math on this is that you will be uh, 38 times improvement, 38x, a 38x improvement. Now, and that's just with the process that I've suggested to you today. But as that grows, this starts to also happen in real time, which means you start to have maybe dozens of these compounding intervals every day. And I have no idea what the math on that is, but it becomes like insane. Your life can become so much better, so much better. You will be shocked when if you put this into practice, you will really be shocked when you look back in a relatively short amount of time, but certainly in a year's time. Your life will be night and day different. You'll be shocked that you ever lived in the way that you used to, that you ever were struggling and suffering and enduring ignorance in the way that you were feeling powerless and victimized, you will be shocked. You'll just, and so grateful uh, that you came upon the knowledge and that the wisdom was there in you to help you to recognize the value of it and to say yes to it. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Hopefully that's clear to you, but if it's not clear to you, then I welcome any questions that you might have. And so if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and I'm happy to stay on and respond to any questions that are in the chat until there are no more questions that I have not responded to in the chat, or until I need to take a break, whichever comes first. Um, and as I'm and of course, if you don't have any questions, I'm perfectly happy with that too. But if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And while I'm just waiting for people to put their questions in the chat, also let me say, for those who will watch this on YouTube, if you've gotten this far uh, and you are not signed up for my mailing list, then I really encourage you to do that, which you can do at my website, joeylott.com. And the reason why I recommend that you sign up for my mailing list is that I send out uh, daily emails. And you might say, well, gee whiz, why would I want to get daily emails from you? Um, I don't know. I mean, if you don't want to get daily emails from me, then definitely don't sign up. But the daily emails are meant to be um, engaging and entertaining, uh, and also supportive and encouraging, and reminding you from lots of different angles of your authentic power, helping and supporting you to discover your self knowledge and to live your best life. As I said earlier in this talk, it, if it was as simple as just the 10-step or a 3-step 3-point thing or something like that, um, then that would be nice. But it doesn't seem to work that way. It seems like we each need to have as many reminders from as many different angles uh, as possible, unless or until it really clicks. And even then, it's often supportive to continue to have reminders and uh, pointers from different angles. So that's why I offer that. And so, if you're not on, if you're not already subscribed to my mailing list, then I really do recommend that you do that. And you can unsubscribe any time if you don't like it, but I recommend that. Also, uh, the topic that I talked about last week, I realized is after I gave that talk, I realized, gee whiz, this is so important, and I have some uh, a wealth of practical suggestions of things that people can do to really uh, integrate that into their lives in a meaningful way, that I decided to put together a course on that. And for those who are on my email list, you probably have seen I sent out some um, emails mentioning that course over the last couple of days. That course is going to start this week. And so I'm just making mention, if you happen to uh, already be on my email list and you didn't see those messages about that, then I really recommend that you check it out and and consider participating in that if that makes any sense to you, because I think it's a really valuable and unique opportunity. And for those who are not on my email lists and you're interested in learning more about that, first step would be get on my email list. It's the only way to learn about it. So you get on my email list, and then I'll send out a couple more reminders until the start date, which will be later this week. So it's not too late to get information about that. Um, so let me check in the chat for questions. So somebody says, how much time should we spend each day for it to be optimal? This was uh, this was sent, I think, at the time when I was talking probably about uh, what's sustainable, the importance of sustainable, regular, practical application of the knowledge and developing the knowledge. So how much time is very individual and personalized because you're the only one who can know that. So think about that image that I gave it of the map that says you are here. If that's not a familiar image to you, then you'll have to come up with your own image. But that image might be useful to you because you have to know where you are. You know, the same map, but without the you are here, it could you could say that's the map that anybody could be potentially applicable to anybody, but everybody has a different starting point. The you are here is unique and individual to the person. And so you have that, you have to know where you are in order to be able to get the results. And so, how much time, and again, time is not the only factor, but time is a factor. It depends on what will work for you. And that's why I said if you take even for people who where they say, I really don't think I can give any significant amount of time to it. I say, well, could you give 2 seconds? Because if you could give at least 2 seconds consistently, then that will add up. But if you say 2 seconds isn't anything, 2 seconds won't help, 2 seconds, why bother? I won't bother. Then you won't get any results. And if you say, well, 2 seconds doesn't seem like that much. I mean, sure, I hear that 2 seconds is something, it's better than nothing, but I really feel like I should, uh, do an hour of these practical explorations every day in order to get good results. Interesting idea, but is that actually sustainable for you? Because if it is, then it might be worth exploring. I can't tell you that that's optimal. It may or may not be, but I mean, you can only find out by trying it out. Uh, but if it's not sustainable for you, then that idea only ends up hurting you if you believe it. And it will be much better to start where you are because you can really only start where you are. So, and that requires self-honesty and reflection. Somebody says, with regards to the rapid resolution method, I imagine the stressful situation or problem, but it never feels as intense as when I experience it in real life. So generating that feeling for the rapid resolution method is difficult. Also, with limiting beliefs, how can we find them? Is every negative thought that comes to mind a limiting belief? Okay. So, uh, it's okay with the rapid resolution method, which is a method for those who are not familiar with it. It's a method I've shared uh, in other videos. Um, it's okay. It's normal that there will be some difference between what you the intensity in your imagination versus when you encounter a similar situation in your outer life. Um, and if you're if you so if you have the expectation that you do the rapid resolution method, and then when you encounter a similar situation in your outer life, that it's just going to be uh, totally comfortable, that's an probably not a helpful expectation to have. It could happen. It does sometimes happen for people. But if you expect that it should happen that way, and then it doesn't, then you could easily feel discouraged or have the sense that it's not working. But sometimes, maybe even often, you will, if you encounter a similar situation in your external life, you will experience some degree of intensity and an impulse to avoid the situation. And if you've done the rapid resolution method correctly, you should have the knowledge, direct knowledge from your actual experience, having done the rapid resolution method, that you can uh, meet that experience in real time in a better way. So you can effectively you can do the same thing that you do with the rapid resolution method, but just there in real time. So notice with the rapid resolution method, it's about um, iterations. So we don't try to sustain the letting go for long periods of time, but rather it's about many iterations of letting go as possible. So you can do the same in real time. If you're in the situation, you're in the circumstances, the conditions that provoke intensity for you, then just number one, know that you're prepared for that because you've used the rapid resolution method. So it's supporting you in being prepared in order to meet that experience in a good way. And number two is use the same principles there in real time. So don't try to sustain letting go, but rather just as many iterations as necessary. So can you choose to let go for 1 second? Great. Then if you go right back into it, you could even choose to go right back into it. You could purposefully go right back into it. And notice, how do you produce that intensity for yourself? So this is kind of related to what I was talking about today. How do you produce that intensity and purposefully go through that process? Because by purposefully going through it, you're becoming more aware of it, and then let go for another second. And if you just continue to repeat that process, then you're becoming more and more aware of the process by which you create the intensity. You're becoming more and more empowered, knowing that you have the ability to let go. And the more iterations you go through, the more you learn, and the more you'll be able to naturally let go, because you'll be learning other options that give you better results just naturally by going through that process. So don't be discouraged if you experience intensity in the uh, in the real life experiences. And you say, with limiting beliefs, how can we find them? Lots of different ways. Too many ways for me to go into detail here, but one way that I'll suggest to you, because I think this is I'll give you two ways. One way is um, note. So if this is connected to identify limiting beliefs connected to specific desires that you have, what I recommend is write down the specific desires and then review those desires every day. And I recommend that you work with no more than three. So prioritize them and only work with the top one, maybe two, maybe three at most desires on a regular basis. And every day put attention one at a time on the desires. And as you do, so if you put attention on one desire, you just notice what would that be like? What would that be like to fulfill that desire, to have the fulfillment of that desire? And then notice as you imagine, just allow yourself to imagine what that would be like. Notice what comes up. And don't try to override or dismiss any of them. Instead, write down whatever comes up. So a lot of what comes up will be the limiting beliefs that are specifically blocking that desire. So if you want whatever the desire is, then, but a desire, but as you're thinking about it, the thought comes up that says, well, that might be possible for other people, but it's not possible for me. Or the thought comes up, I'm just not good enough for that. Or if the thought comes up, nothing ever works out for me, so why bother? Or if the thought comes up, uh, I can never hold on to anything good. These would all be examples of limiting beliefs specifically connected to that desire. They might be connected to other desires too, but they're obviously, if they come up as you're imagining or allowing yourself to imagine that one specific desire, then whatever limiting beliefs come up in regard to that are specific to that desire. So write them down. That way you'll know what those limiting beliefs are. And then another way that you just, and this is complementary. This is not meant to be do one or the other, but you could do both. Um, uh, you could ask yourself, what would a person have to believe in order to uh, behave in the way that I do? So that will help you to come up with some other beliefs. Then you say, is every negative thought that comes to mind a limiting belief? I mean, in a sense, yes. But you can notice which they don't necessarily all have equal weight. So you can just notice the degree to which you believe things. Um, but but in a sense, yes. I mean, if you have any if you have if you have a thought, and when you have that thought, you have a sense that it is not nonsense, then it's a belief. So you can have a thought that is not a belief, and you can prove that to yourself by purposefully thinking something that you don't believe. Like you could think to yourself, assuming you don't believe this, you could think to yourself, I am a hybrid lion dinosaur telephone. And just notice when you think that, does that strike you as nonsense? If it strikes you as nonsense, then you don't have that belief. But otherwise, if you think I'm a hybrid lion dinosaur telephone and you're like, ooh, then strangely, you apparently would have the belief. If you're like, well, that's weird. That's I guess that I never really thought about it before, but now that I think about it, it seems plausible. Then apparently you have the belief. But if it strikes you as nonsense, it's not a belief. So a thought, you can have a thought that's not a belief, but any thought that you have where it does not seem like nonsense is a belief. And then you say the rapid resolution method gets rid of those blocks. Well, so it's an interesting question. Rapid resolution gets rid of those blocks. I mean, rapid resolution, I mean, it does. So rapid resolution does release beliefs. Uh, and could view that through other lenses. But it's not, I've never used that tool specifically with the intention of releasing a specific belief. Uh, Off the top of my head, I don't have any obvious thoughts regarding that, but it wouldn't be my go-to tool for releasing specific beliefs. Uh, I can see how it could work, but I think it's faster and more direct to use some other methods. Um, the method that I share in the meaning mastery program would be my go-to tool for that for most people because it gives pretty good results pretty consistently. All right. Uh, so this person says, my housemate continues to violate physical boundaries when I am cooking or at the sink. When he wants something, he just grabs over me or physically moves in ways that I have to make space, almost pushing me instead of saying, excuse me. I have addressed it, but it keeps happening and has happened with other housemates. Some of them were very unpleasant people. People, especially men, also do that a lot at the supermarket in New York City, and I hate it. Makes me unsafe, and I don't like when other people, and especially men, grab over me and push me out of the way without saying, excuse me. I have a whole storybook of what that means. Of course, it makes me feel trampled on and unsafe. I internally shrinked and felt powerless and exhausted about the repeated situation, despite saying something about it earlier. Then it turns into being uncomfortable, hopeless, distant to the housemate, resentful, and angry. Um, so there are a lot of things that might be helpful in regard to this. Uh, I'm going to suggest two things. This is not meant, like I said, there are many things that could be helpful in regard to this. So um, feel free to work with these two things and let me know what the results are. If you're satisfied with the results, then obviously you wouldn't need anything else. If you're dissatisfied with the results, you can let me know that, and I could make some other suggestions. So the first thing is so boundaries. Um, we all have our own style of personal boundaries, or I should say styles, because we use different. Sometimes we use different styles of boundaries in different contexts. Uh, but we're not usually consciously aware of the styles of boundaries that we're using. So the styles of boundaries that we use are, like I say, usually unconscious, and also we're usually unconsciously. So we're unconsciously aware also of other people's styles of boundaries. So we're communicating largely unconsciously with one another about our styles of boundaries. Um, and so there's something about your styles of boundaries that are and I want to be I just want to preface this by saying um you're not responsible for other people's behavior or actions. Uh so I'm not suggesting that. So the way that other people behave is their responsibility. And your style of boundaries does not mean that you're responsible for how they behave. However, um, largely you're not able to, I mean, you're not able to directly control how other people behave, but you can make choices around your own style of boundaries. And your style of boundaries has an influence in other people's behavior, even though you're not directly controlling their behavior. They're still responsible for their behavior, but it does have an influence because it's one way in which you're communicating with them. So I hear that you've communicated verbally, um, but it there seems like there's also an unconscious communication of your styles of boundaries that may be uh, influencing your experience in this regard. So, what one thing that you can do here is you can just start to bring more conscious awareness to your styles of boundaries. So you could think about uh, different scenarios, different situations, and notice if in those situations, if you were able to see your boundaries, your personal boundaries, what would they look like? So you can notice what sort of substance would they be made out of? Uh, what is their size? What is their shape? How far from your body do they extend? Um, what color are they? What's their thickness? Um, so you can notice all of these different qualities if you were able to see the boundaries. So it's just sort of a imaginative play kind of exercise. So don't worry about there's not a right answer. Don't worry that you're not getting it right or anything. Just allow yourself to explore that. Um, and then notice and then you can experiment. And I really recommend that you only work with changing one variable at a time. Because if you try to change many variables at the same time, you won't know what change produces what effect. So only one variable at a time. Like you could experiment with what happens if you imagine changing the substance that they're made out of. That would be one variable. Another variable would be imagine changing the thickness. Another variable would be imagine changing the color, and so forth. Um, and and just play with making changes in your imagination in specific contexts to your style of boundaries until you find something that works better for you. Um, so sounds like at a minimum, it would be useful for you to do that exploration for the style of boundaries that you use when you are at home, for example, doing dishes, sounds like, or at the sink, whatever you might be doing at the sink. And another one would be when you're at, what did you say? The supermarket in New York City. So that's the first suggestion. And then the second suggestion is the 3 points of view exercise, which I think you know. I'm not going to go into detail on it here, um, but I think you know that exercise. If you don't, then you can let me know and I can get the instructions to you. But I would recommend that you do that exercise with uh, the specific people and the specific circumstances where you're experiencing this trouble. So, for example, when you could imagine when you are at the sink and your housemate uh, is wanting something that is near to the sink. How does the setup would be then? How does your housemate feel about you? And then second point of view would be how do you feel in that situation when you're aware that your housemate feels that way about you? And then how do you want to feel? That would be the 3 points of view. And then you could do the same with men at the supermarket in New York City. So those are my two recommendations to start with. And let me know if you have questions about that. And then also let me know what your results are with that. Somebody says, everything you're saying is pure gold. But how do I remember this process and the wisdom when I'm lost in the moment and seem to have completely disconnected from all awareness? Or is this something only to be done in quietness for later real-time integration? Um, Great question. So as I mentioned, the ideal would be to have that awareness conscious awareness of subtlety of the inner process, allowing you to make changes in real time. However, that's back to starting where you are. So if that's not where you are, if you find that 90+% of your day you're kind of dissociated, stressed, fearful, worried, hypervigilant, whatever it might be, then which is which is the normal state that most people find themselves in, then it, then don't place an unrealistic demand on yourself that you should be uh, present and aware all the time of the subtlety of your inner experience, inner process, because that's just not where you're starting from. Um, what that could be more of an intention that you can have that you can grow into, but it will just happen naturally as a result of working with these things that I've been suggesting. So specifically in regard to the practical suggestion from today, what I recommend, and well, in general, I recommend establishing these uh, explorations as part of your daily routine so that they become habit. Um, and because when you do something, so daily routine is extremely powerful. You're uh, piggybacking on on a power that's already present in nature. There's already daily rhythm. If you try to establish something that's not synchronized with that, it's harder and doesn't get as much power as quickly. It's not impossible, and it's not that it's of no benefit whatsoever, but it's much more powerful to establish something in sync with the daily rhythm. I mean, if you notice, the sun rises, the sun sets, which I was going to say that if you're above, if you're at the Arctic, above or above the Arctic Circle, below the Antarctic Circle, I guess, um, still happens, but at a different. That's a much larger time range. But anyway, but for most of us who are not living at those extremes, we have this daily cycle: sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. So we see this pattern is there, and our bodies synchronized to that, and and we have natural uh, daily rhythms. So if we purposefully synchronize any habits that we want to establish with the daily rhythm, it becomes much easier to establish them. It's a long-winded way of saying that I recommend that you find a time and place where you can consistently put these things into practice in a way that will work for you. For many people, that it works well to do things in the morning. From probably the majority of people, morning is easier to have a uh, more of a conscious choice in than other times of day. But it's not always true for everybody. But that as a starting point, I would recommend at least considering morning. Um, and if not morning, then you can find another time. And each of these things that I recommend, they really, I can't emphasize this enough, they can be done in a very short amount of time. So don't think that you have to have that you have to commit 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 60 minutes or anything like that, because it really honestly is not necessary. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from that. If that's what's true for you and it's sustainable and that gives you good results and you're happy with that, that's fine. It's great. I'm not saying that shorter is always better. I'm just saying that such a common idea that people have that more time equals better, more time equals more effective. And it's really not true. What's true is consistency and sincerity. If you That's what gives the power, because as I've said, then you have compounding effects. I really cannot emphasize how powerful compounding effects are. Uh, I have an unpublished newsletter entirely dedicated to this subject, which I may publish at some point. um, it's like 20 pages just on the subject of compounding effects. Because it's when you really understand this, it changes your life. Um, so you could all the things that I suggested, uh, certainly the things that I suggested from the practical suggestions from this week and last week, you could uh, apply those you could do that every single day, and it would take you could do it in less than a minute. You could really honestly do it in less than a minute and get real results. That would It would probably not, it almost certainly would not be dramatically life-changing overnight. It almost certainly would be not dramatically life-changing even over the course of a week or a month. But over the course of 6 months to a year, the amount of change would be really remarkable, unlike anything else probably you've ever experienced before. Which is a bold claim, but really true if you do it consistently and sincerely, and it literally less than a minute every day. So please don't think that you need to dedicate a lot of time to it. And I really keep emphasizing that because people will often be so dismissive of something if they say, well, if I can, it's not worth doing if I can't dedicate 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes to it. But then every day that you don't, just take the 1 minute or the 30 seconds, you're significantly holding yourself back, because it's like if you, if you, if you had if your parents had invested, I don't know, $100 in like a S&P 500 index fund when you were born, you'd have, I don't know the exact math on it, but it averages 10% return per year. That's an average. Some years it's negative, um, but on average it's a little over 10%. So, and that's just annual compounding, but you'd have a lot of money. You'd have a lot of money, even just starting with a very small amount. And that's just an annual compound. But but the point is, but it's sort of like also the proverb about when's the best time to plant a tree? The answer is 40 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. So if you uh but every day that you postpone, you're missing out on significant compounding effects, because when you start today and then you are consistent, it might take you 3, 4, 5 months before you really start to notice significant results. But then from that point forward, it blows your mind. So, but every day that you put it off, then it's that much longer until you get to the point where you really start to notice the results. So if you postpone it for whatever reason, but I'm pointing out here, if the excuse is, well, I don't have enough time to dedicate to it. If that's the reason why you postpone it, it's a big mistake. Because if you just dedicate 30 seconds a day, then 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now, you will start to really notice the benefits of it. But you postpone it because for whatever reason, including because you say, I don't have the time. I'll start when I have the time. I'll start when whatever reasons. Uh, then you're just robbing yourself, basically. So just find a time that works for you, that you can consistently apply yourself and make it a priority, and find a way to make it enjoyable. Um, because if certainly if it's unpleasant, you're not going to do it. So make it enjoyable. Shouldn't be a chore or a task. It should be something that you can look forward to. Um, and if you need any, if you have any struggle with that, you can let me know and give me specifics, and I might be able to make some suggestions for how you could improve that. Okay, so somebody says, I feel that I got what you are talking about. However, I feel that I can't see the other option. I have an image that because of a thought, I see another terrifying image, but it seems true for me, and I will stop there. Well, yeah, so this is what we normally do to ourselves is we um, believe that we've got where it's like this idea of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. So we say, well, I've got two options. I got a rock and I got a hard place. Hmm, which will it be? The rock or the hard place? Hmm, neither one seems appealing. Let me contemplate this a little longer. Rock, hard place. And the more that we practice that, the more that becomes reinforced and we really blind ourselves. Uh, in the list of the all the things that I listed that I'm among the things that are included in this upcoming course. If you happen to read that introduction letter, you might have seen the one where I said this something about this thing about how 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 people are hypnotized so that they literally will not even see a man in a gorilla suit who's standing directly in front of them. And uh, this is a worldwide occurrence, and it's called selective attention. This is the name that's given to it by researchers. But if your attention is directed at something, you will literally not even see something that is right in front of you, like a man dressed in a gorilla suit. Might seem shocking, but for anybody who's seen this selective attention test video, the original one, then you'll know the reference. This is it's like better than 50% of people who will not see the man in the gorilla suit, despite the fact that the man in the gorilla suit is right there, right in front of them, in plain view, not hidden in the least. So society has taught us, trained us to not recognize what is directly right there in front of us through selective attention because society says you have choice A, you have choice B. Which will it be? Will it be choice A or will it be choice B? And it just keeps pointing, over here, choice A, over there, choice B. Which will it be? Will it be choice A or will it be choice B? Choice A or choice B? And so your attention is going to A and B, A and B, A and B. And you become so hypnotized that you don't you don't even see the infinity of options that are directly in front of you. So that's the most important thing is just to trust in that. I mean, if the more that you can start to recognize how this is happening, I mean, you can it only works. It only works. I mean, it works for better than 50% of the people who don't know about the selective attention uh, test. But you can look up selective. I think it's called selective attention test on YouTube, And you may or may not be one of the, I don't know if you'll see the thing or not, but there are actually now multiple selective attention test videos, and one of them at some point you'll have the effect, and you'll if you go through it and you have the experience for yourself that you really did not see something that otherwise would have been obvious, then this can start to open you up to realizing that this is going on all the time. It's all the time going on. And so then knowing that, you can just keep reminding yourself of that. So when you say, "Oh, I don't see any other options," you just relax and just remind yourself, um, that's just because of selective attention. I've been trained to only attend to these options. There's this one that's bad and there's this other one that's bad, and I'm not sure which one's worse. And because of that, I've been trained not to notice the other options that are actually here plainly available once I am no longer hypnotized. So you just keep reminding yourself of that and just keep relaxing and trusting and knowing it will become clear to me. I just have to allow myself to relax. When the impulse is there, it says, "We'll look at option A." I just relax and just, and I've looked at option A plenty of times. I don't need to do that. Is when the impulse arises, well, but remember option B, just relax and remind yourself, I'm aware of option B. I don't need to look at option B. And you just keep relaxing, and then other options will emerge. I can't tell you how long that will take, but it will definitely happen. And and when you see say a terrifying image, it may be that your attention, you may be compelled to give your attention to some of these options because of the strong emotional charge attached to them. So fear, those usually seem to compel our attention. But knowing that every time you indulge that, you are uh, just reinforcing the hypnosis so that you don't recognize the other options that are plainly here. I recommend that you use whatever tools are supportive for you in releasing the emotional charge connected to those things. Because the image is not terrifying. Images cannot be terrifying. Uh, there is an internal process by which you produce terror for yourself associated with the image. But the image itself is just an image. The image is neutral, cannot be terrifying. I know some people will say that's not possible. The images are definitely terrifying. And I'm telling you, it's the truth. There's no such thing as a terrifying image. Uh, so, to the degree that you feel compelled to produce terror for yourself when there's an image, I recommend that you use whatever tools support you in releasing that emotional charge so that, I mean, for example, the rapid resolution method would be one such tool. It's not the only tool, but it's one that comes to mind that you could use. The idea being you the simplified version would be you look at the image, intensify the terror, and then let go for a second. Distract yourself, come back, purposefully look at the image, intensify the terror as much as you can, then just completely let go. Distract. Just repeat that process until you can see the image in a completely neutral way, where it no longer compels you to produce the terror for yourself. That would be helpful. Somebody says, "Can we do this constantly?" I I don't know about we. I think you're probably wondering about you, and only you would know the answer to that um, for yourself. So, but um, but it but so I would say, ideally, maybe ideally, it would happen continuously. Uh, but this is another matter of knowing yourself and starting where you are. So, uh, if you are able to do that and that feels good to you and it gives you good results, then that speaks for itself. If you find that you're not able to do that at all, or in a good way that gives you good results that you feel good about, that also speaks for itself. So, uh, but I recommend you drop the idea that you need to. Instead, just start where you are. If you just start with the simple suggestion that I made today, just to do it purposefully once per day, you're welcome to do it more than that if you want, and it gives you good results and you like it and you can, but don't think that you need to or you should, because if you just consistently do it once a day, even for 30 seconds or 60 seconds, like I suggested today, that consistency will give you compound effects over time, which will eventually result in you having a continuity of that subtlety of awareness. Then this person says, also, I have issues getting clarity on my desires. I have a belief that the bigger things like financial abundance would take longer to manifest, so I look to focusing on smaller desires. Well, you have issues getting clarity on your desires. I th uh I'm not sure if that is true. I'm based on what you've written, it sounds like maybe, but I don't know. You do have clarity about your desires. Maybe it's not a clarity issue. Maybe it's just that, as you say, you have some beliefs that are unhelpful. Um, if so, so the basic exercise that I recommend is every day ask yourself, what do I really want? And then write down your uncensored response to that. It does not, you do not have to consciously agree with it. You don't have to act on any of it. You don't have to accept it as true. It's just about beginning to allow for that expression. Because what happens most of the time is, you see, we have been we've been divided. We've divided ourselves internally into many parts, and certain parts have a tendency to dominate. They are these little totalitarian dictators who rule with iron fists, and they say it's my way or the highway. Everybody else can either get in line or go to hell. And it's just what society's taught us. Your parents taught you, your teachers taught you. It's there's a time you got to sit at your desk in the row, and you got to hold in everything until it's the time to go to the restroom and so forth and so on. And the this has just contributed to this violence within ourselves. And so we censor ourselves largely unconsciously. And it gets to a point where we tell ourselves, well, I don't even have clarity about what I want. So this exercise, and again, you start where you are. You don't have to take a long time with it. You just got to find out what's sustainable for you, but consistency is key. So even if you were just to do this for a couple minutes every day, as long as you do it consistently, you'll see results from this. Just ask yourself the question, what do I really want? And then write as uncensored as possible. Don't try to have good handwriting. Don't try to make it grammatically correct. Do not think it first and analyze it before writing it. Don't allow yourself to judge it before writing it. Just write. And you'll get clarity that way. But again, it also sounds like you might already have some clarity, at least enough clarity to start with, but you're censoring yourself because of these beliefs. Like you say, well, There are bigger things and there are smaller things. Bigger things and smaller things. Bigger and smaller. Bigger and smaller. And the big things, even if I really want them, because they're big, they take a long time. They're too hard. I don't know if I can do it. So maybe it's better for me to just focus on the small things, even though maybe I don't really want the small things so much. Um, so the beliefs would be useful to identify and release. So you could write them down. I mean, you've already written them down, to some degree, but you could write down more of the details of what comes to you regarding these beliefs that are blocking you. Like, so belief that they're bigger things and smaller things. That's a belief. And then like I mean that idea that belief is just a belief. Bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. I mean it I mean in some sense are there bigger and smaller things in a relative way, yes, you could say like is the Taj Mahal bigger uh a than a Ferrari? Yes, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure the Taj Mahal is bigger than a Ferrari by certain measures. By other measures, maybe not. I don't know. But when it comes to desires, the idea that you have bigger and smaller desires, this it doesn't seem like it's all that belief is helping you. And it's just a belief. It's not actually literally true. And then on top of that, that bigger desires take longer to manifest. It's just another belief. Why would that be? This is not necessarily true. I mean, what I would say is probably true is that uh, it takes longer to manifest something if you have uh, internal resistance, limiting beliefs, interference, which is blocking you from consistently applying energy to it, and you don't resolve those things. Because in order to manifest something, it needs energy. You need to direct the energy to it. But if you refuse to direct the energy to it because you have these limitations, this internal interference, and you don't clear the interference, then probably mostly true that that's going to make it take longer to manifest. And I think that's what you're describing here is that you have a desire, but you also have interference, which is which you're allowing to block you from giving energy consistently to what you desire. Uh, so it would make a lot of sense to me to release those things that are interfering. Okay, somebody says, I have encountered a recurring pattern in my life where I keep on switching jobs and actually have the urge to do something for myself or be free, even though I know it's hard to get free if you already are. Yeah, well, that's true. It's impossible to get free if you're already free. You can't get free if you are free. uh, this makes working a regular job quite challenging. How would I apply what we discussed today in such a place? How would you apply what was discussed today? Oh, well, so you're asking that question, I'll respond to that question, then I'll respond to another question that you didn't ask. So in regard to how might you apply what I shared today in this specific situation, that would be just to notice uh, in regard to the job, working a job, you could notice any times you just apply the practical suggestion that I gave today specifically to non-optimal experiences that you have in regard to the job. So if you have whatever those might be, so if it's while you're at the job and you notice non-optimal experiences, if it's when you're thinking about the job, if it's whatever that might be. So just whatever the non-optimal experiences are specific to the job, use the process that I shared today, and that will help you to shift what you're doing internally so that you can have better outcomes, which will give you more freedom internally. Um, and what that will specifically look like or result in, I don't know. Could could look like a lot of different things. So I have no way of knowing that specifically, but um, that's how I would recommend applying what I suggested today specifically to that. Then what you didn't ask, but I'm going to answer anyway, is um, what else might be useful, and so uh, I would my recommendation is um, ask. So it sounds like you have this internal conflict. There's a part of you that wants to work a regular job. And there's another part of you that uh, wants to do something for yourself or be free. Um, and so on the surface, the strategies of these two parts are opposed. The one part says, I want to work a regular job, and another part says, I want to do something for myself or be free. And they seem to be in opposition to one another. So you have this conflict internally. And usually what happens is then in these situations is that uh, one part will get the upper hand for a little while, and then the other part will get the upper hand for a little while. So, uh, and that sounds like what's happening for you because you say you keep switching jobs. So switching jobs would be because one part of you says, I want to work a regular job. And that part gets the upper hand and you work a regular job. And then after a little while, the other part of you gets the upper hand and it says, enough already. I don't want to work this regular job. I want to do something else, something where I can experience freedom, something for myself. And then again, at some point, the other part gets the upper hand. And so they're flip flopping. And this is causing this internal conflict to manifest as this external instability. So what I would recommend then is to uh, work with these parts of yourself. And I don't remember if I think I might have shared with you at some point, the person who asked this question, I think I might have shared with you a video in which I gave a specific process. Um, I'll just go through it quickly here though. So what I would do is the first most important thing is to acknowledge that all parts of you have positive intention. So you might have habits of judging the parts based on the strategies, but the strategies are different than the intention. The strategies are the ways in which the parts are attempting to fulfill its intentions. But if you're just focused on the strategies, then you can have you just perpetuate the conflict. So instead, it's important to accept and acknowledge that all parts of you have positive intention, and then one at a time, talk to these parts and ask them what their positive intentions are. And then you can go through a process of uh, identifying what is the core value that the part is trying to fulfill through its strategy. The so this part of you that wants to work a regular job, you can ask that part, what is your positive intention in working a regular job? And it will tell you whatever it's going to say. I could speculate. I won't bother speculating though. You'll find out. And then whatever its response is, you can ask it, when you have that, what does that give you? And you just keep asking that question uh, of the responses until there you doesn't seem like there's really much further to go with it because you'll get to some core value. Oftentimes, those core values are going to be expressed. I should say, the core value is something that is internal, intrinsic, does not depend on external conditions or circumstances, uh, and usually that's going to be expressed using words like love or peace or harmony or joy or happiness, connection, something like that. Um, so you do this process with both parts, find out what is the positive intention expressed as a core value. And sometimes the core value that both parts are wanting is the same. Sometimes they're different, but they'll be compatible. So you just identify if they're the same, that's obvious. If they're different, you just ask yourself, are these compatible values? Which they will be if you've elicited a really a core value. So then it's just a matter of negotiating with these parts and don't put any pressure on the parts to figure it out right away. It takes as long as it takes. It might take 10 seconds. It might take 10 days, whatever. It's just low pressure, but just invite a process of working together to identify new strategies that will allow you to achieve those values, those core values that are intended by both parts in a way that's harmonious. Um, when you do that, then you can resolve this pattern. Uh, and let me know how that goes, or if you have specific questions about that. Somebody wants to know what course is starting soon. So it's called Living Wholeness. If you're on my email list, which I think you are, then I checked the emails that I sent out yesterday and the day before. There's a link in them to the uh, more information and how to sign up. Okay, somebody says where I struggle is I become aware of my anxiety or feeling threatened by somebody, but still dedicate my attention to anxiety, even that I'm aware of breath, that I'm not taking it's an internal war. Yeah. Um, so 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 this could just be a habit of assigning meaning. So the so uh, so there's certain. So you say anxiety. So how do you know that there's anxiety? You can answer that if you want. Um, while while I'm waiting for you to respond, uh, which you may or may not do, but I'll suggest that for many people, the way that they would know that there is anxiety is because there are sensations. And there might also be, along with those sensations, a habit of particular thoughts or images. So the so if you think about it, it is we just use the name anxiety as a label for when these particular phenomena are occurring. The sensations, maybe certain thoughts or images. I'm pretty sure from it would be extremely rare, if ever, I think, that a person would claim that they're experiencing anxiety if there are no sensations that they've associated that they're calling anxiety. So this person says high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing. Yeah. So sensations. I mean the high heartbeat and the hand shaking. not breathing, maybe sensations of sort. Um, so, so, so if, but in this case, so with those specifics, so when you say anxiety, if we take, if, so the word anxiety in this case for you is really just a label that's used as a shorthand way of referring to high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing. But we don't need that word anxiety. In fact, that word anxiety starts to become a problem for us once we've identified what it's pointing to. Because if we think there's a thing called anxiety, now we're fighting with anxiety. Anxiety is our enemy, and we're trying to get rid of anxiety, but there is no anxiety. What there really is high heartbeat, hands shaking, not breathing. So then from that point forward, referring to it as anxiety turns out not to be helpful because calling it anxiety suggests that there's something there that's not there. What's actually there is high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing. So it's useful then just to dispense with the the word anxiety and instead and this is true regardless of what it is. For different people, it will be different things. So in this specific case, for this person who's asking, they say they uh, describe this as high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing. For other people, it might be other things, but the same what I'm describing here applies in any case. So whatever it is that's being called anxiety, once you identify what it actually consists of, it's no longer useful to call it anxiety. We don't need to call it anxiety. Instead, we can just refer to what it is that's happening because there's no actual anxiety. Anxiety was never there. There was never a thing called anxiety. Anxiety was only ever just a word that we used to point to this cluster of things. So once we know what the things are, we can do away with the word anxiety and instead we can just describe what's happening. High heartbeat, hands shaking, not breathing. Okay, interesting. So high heartbeat, hands shaking, not breathing. For whatever reason, maybe because there's a habit, some residual effect, or who knows what reason, could be some other reason. There's high heartbeat, hands shaking, not breathing. That's interesting. We could just start to approach it that way. It's just interesting. Hmm. So then, uh, is there something that I'm going to do about high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing? I don't know. I mean, if something obvious comes to mind, and that's intuitively sense that that's a good answer, that it's like gentle and nurturing and loving and caring, why, give it a shot. But if there's nothing that comes to mind, then there's nothing to do anyway, so you don't need to do anything. So you could just notice, oh, interesting. Maybe I don't know anything to do, and there's this high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing. Since there doesn't seem to be anything that I know to do, at least not right now, and there's just high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing, then I'll just be aware of the breath. Oh, interesting. There's no breathing. That's easy. So I'm aware of not breathing until there's breathing. And then I'm aware of breathing. And if there's not breathing, I'm aware of not breathing. And if my attention again goes back to high heartbeat, hand shaking, okay. And if my attention goes to anxiety, then again, I can just question, well, what is this anxiety? What am I really talking about? I'm talking about high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing. So again, I can just let go of the label of anxiety and just notice, oh, there's just these things. Now, is there anything that's obvious to me that seems good that I could do that might help me with this? Is any of this actually a problem? If so, great, let me try that. And if not, then again, I'm just back to, well, all that's happening is this high heartbeat, hand shaking, not breathing. Let me just be aware of, in this case, not breathing until there's breathing. And then I'm aware of breathing, unless there's not breathing, in which case I'm aware of not breathing. And So it might not, it's possible so there's a possibility that that same thing could, high heartbeat, handshaking, not breathing, that could go on indefinitely. We don't know. Uh, but it's not anxiety. That's something that's possible to get clear on. And uh, and then by getting clear that it's not anxiety, because if it's anxiety, then I've got a problem of anxiety and I got to do something or not. But if I can become clear that there's no anxiety, anxiety is not a thing. What I'm actually talking about is high heartbeat, handshaking, not breathing. Then I can just start to acknowledge, well, that's what's happening. Is any of that a problem? Is there anything that I could do that might be helpful? If so, let me try that out. If not, then let me just be aware of not breathing until there's breathing, in which case I'll become aware of breathing until or unless there's not breathing, and then I'll be aware of not breathing. And this pattern might play out over and over and over indefinitely. Um, and if you're not willing to accept that, then I don't have any better advice for you. If you're willing to accept that, then the uh, interesting thing is that your your relationship with all of it will change in a way that will be much nicer for you. Whether the high heartbeat and handshaking and not breathing continues or not, between you and me, it's not going to last forever. Um, I just don't have a way of knowing how long it will last. It could last for seconds or minutes or hours or days or years. I really don't know. Uh, I just know, I'm fairly certain that relating to it as anxiety and relating to that as a problem uh, tends to be miserable and unhelpful. And relating to it in the way that I've described tends to not be miserable and to be helpful. So that's my that's my suggestion about it. Uh, so somebody says, "Do you use a smartphone? I find it takes lots of attention away, but it is hard to stop. It's an issue because I feel there is more pull toward negative attention because energy goes towards screens, mental exhaustion, while that was not an issue with older phones in terms of manifestation and feeling content. And what are your thoughts on modern Wi-Fi?" Okay. Uh, I, uh, so my observation and slash opinion, I'll just say my opinion. My opinion is that the, uh, okay, let me just take a step back. So the, the law of attention is that attention directs energy. What is everything? Everything is energy. What does everything want? Energy. So when you really understand that, you'll realize that everything wants your attention because everything wants your energy. So consciously or unconsciously, this is my opinion. Uh, the thing, everything's vying for your attention, and the uh, technologies are um, consciously and unconsciously designed to get as much of your attention as possible. The energy. So think about one way that energy is measured and manifest is through money. Not in any way meant to be the only way, but it is one way. It's one way that you can measure energy. And these businesses which are uh, wanting to make money, they they're another way of saying that is that they're wanting to have more energy. And how is that energy? How do they get that energy? Through attention. So they want your attention because that's how they grow their energy and money. Uh, I don't think that's a secret. I mean, I say that's my opinion, but it seems really pretty obvious. I think that's pretty much, I think everybody more or less admits to that. I think that's like how it's designed and structured. Uh, so with that said, um, I uh, I find that that the uses of the technology, the businesses that are involved in utilizing the technologies, um, are uh, consciously and unconsciously doing everything they can to get your attention. Whether it and it has nothing to do with whether it's in your best interest or not. Like their motivation is to get your attention, and that does not have they're not thinking about it. Their intention is not to do what's best for you. Their intention, and in many cases, their mandate is to get as much of your attention as possible because that's what translates into money. And many of them, their mandate is to make money because they're corporations that are answerable to a board that are ultimately answerable to their investors, and their investors want return on investment. So they have a mandate to make more money, constantly growing money, which means more and more attention. So they want as much attention as possible. So the reason I'm saying all of this is that I think that it takes a uh, a level of evolution that is beyond my present evolution in order to uh, not not succumb to the pulls for attention. So I make choices as much as I can to protect myself from that stuff. Because I know, for example, so I do not use Facebook at all, at all. I will not. I just do not use it at all. I don't care what the reason. I just do not use it. I do not use Instagram. I do not use TikTok. I don't use Quora. I don't use Reddit. Uh, Although I have gotten a little slack on Reddit recently. Uh, I've clicked on a few search results recently that seemed relevant that came up. Um, but I make conscious choices not to use any of those because I know I've observed my own behavior when I have uh, made use of them. Even even when I have very specific purposes that I'm using them for, I'm not using them for wasting time. I'm not using them for entertainment purposefully, but I see how I behave, and I've realized that what works best for me is just not to use them at all. So in order to protect myself, I make the choice not to use them. Um, I do use YouTube. It is the only that I'm aware of. It's the only social media platform that I do use, but I and I'm certain it's against their policies. But nonetheless, I in order to protect my own interests, I do use some tools to disable features so that because I've seen my behavior. I make a choice to use YouTube because I publish content on YouTube, and because there are a few things that I there are few very few things on YouTube that I where I actually a few content creators or publishers on YouTube that I get value from. So I at this time am choosing to use YouTube, but I want to protect myself because again, I've seen I've seen my behavior when I don't have those safeguards because it's designed to get attention, to keep people on the platform, to keep them clicking from one thing to the next. It rewards. I mean, I'm already saying too much here, but like I have because I publish stuff on YouTube, I have uh, investigated at times ways to reach a larger audience on YouTube, and I'm subscribed to a couple of email lists of people who teach how to do that kind of thing. And what I've seen, not surprisingly, because I used to, I'm not even going to go there, but but what I've seen is that so the people who are interested in reaching more people on YouTube typically are they are trying to understand how does the so-called YouTube algorithm work because uh, the way in which they have found to get more to reach a wider audience on YouTube is to uh, have YouTube recommend their videos to uh, users of the platform. And in order to do that, they determine did what is it that YouTube is looking for? What is the algorithm looking for that it will then promote videos or push videos to viewers on the platform? So then, uh, once this information becomes available, more content creators start to use that information. But notice that all of that, that's why the titles on YouTube are the YouTube algorithm basically is training content creators on YouTube to craft their content in ways that will get as much attention from viewers as possible and keep that attention on the platform for as long as possible. A lot of words just to get to that point, which is one of the reasons why I have mixed feelings, inner conflict. I got some parts work to do regarding using YouTube at all. Uh, because I don't think that it's good to publishing basically the more successful somebody is on YouTube as a content creator. What that really means is that they are YouTube is the winner in that. The bigger winner because YouTube is rewarding those content creators who get as much attention and keep that attention on the platform. That can't be good for you and me. That can't be good for humanity. Uh, so I agree with you. You say it takes a lot of attention away. Yeah, and it's not good for you. And you say it's hard to stop. Yeah, I understand. Basically, long story short, me too. which is why I choose to protect myself and not use those things as much as possible. And still, I still have ways to go because I still use search engines, which is another. It's just search engines are another. Oh, I do not use purposefully. I don't use any of the chat. I don't know what you call them. The various AI things of the specific type, like Chat GPT or Claude. I dabbled in them briefly uh, and realized what a big mistake there. Uh, but search engines are also a big problem in that regard, and I still have some trouble with that. Uh, so I don't have a lot of good advice to offer there, other than recognize what is recognize your behavior and uh, choose what you really want, and then if you have, and then identify the inner conflict that you have regarding that, because there will be inner conflict, and then resolve that inner conflict. Find a way to achieve what all parts of you ultimately want in a way that's harmonious. That's the best advice I have at this time. Oh, and you asked about Wi-Fi. I um I think so. I think the number one thing is and I'm assuming because we've had some uh interaction about regarding these things in the past. So I think probably you're asking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're probably asking because you're uh somewhat fearful of it. Um and uh so the number one thing is that I fear is the fear is worse than anything that Wi-Fi is going to do to you. So fear is worse than anything 5G is going to do to you. Fear is worse than anything that AI is going to do to you. Fear is worse than anything that YouTube is going to do to you. Fear is worse than anything that Facebook is going to do to you. So fear is the number one thing. Don't let the fear control you. Uh, so get clear on that and resolve that for yourself. And then beyond that, I think make trust your intuition on things and make reasonable choices that align with what's important and valuable to you. So uh, feel if you feel like intuitively, if you feel like Wi-Fi is not for you, that it doesn't work well for you, that you prefer not to be exposed to Wi-Fi um, any more than otherwise is going to happen incidentally, then you can just make conscious choices aligned with that within reason for yourself. But again, don't be fearful uh, because at this point, you're not going to avoid those kinds of things. Uh, I mean, it's just not gonna it's not gonna happen, at least not anytime soon. So it doesn't make I don't think that it's wise to be fearful or get stressed about it. But again, then within that context, um, take reasonable steps that align with what seems true and good to you. So like if you don't like the experience of excessive exposure to Wi-Fi for yourself, and you're clear about that, um, and you can take reasonable steps to minimize your exposure to Wi-Fi, then great. But don't be fearful about it. It's like because that's the bigger problem. Okay, somebody says, I've been writing my intention for over 2 years, and I must say that in a lot of ways the desires have manifested themselves, but fundamentally it's obviously never completely there. There seems to be, instead of clear limiting beliefs, just a subtle but very dense situation which might even cover days or weeks, which, if I have to label them, embody mediocrity, and that it's like a faraway fantasy when I put my attention on it. Would you have some clarity on this in regard to your message today, but also the rapid resolution method? So, um, I mean, I think that the the clearer you get on what you really want, then I think it often will it what you're describing is not probably not uncommon, because the thing is, the what you really want, um the reason why you really want it is largely because you don't yet know practically uh how to achieve it. So the other things, if you want $1 million, you get $1 million, then it's clear you've achieved that. There's not a gray area in it. But you didn't. But $1 million was never ultimately what you really wanted. I'm not discouraging anybody from following through on financial goals you if it's authentic, reasonably authentic for you. But I'm just making the point that ultimately money is not really what we want. Um, so the clearer you get about what it is that you really want, then it will tend to be less clear to you what that how what that really looks like and how to achieve it until it becomes clear. Um, so and I would expect that you would encounter a lot of along the way in that process. You're going to encounter what's been really blocking you, which you're describing as this mediocrity, that it's far away fantasy. Those are the kinds of things that have been blocking you. And for other people, it will be other things. It might be what they would call depression or anxiety or anger or resentment or whatever it is. But these are the things that will start to present themselves more and more clearly in your life. And if you're thinking that it should be this very apparently linear path where you subjectively feel better and better and happier and closer day by day, it's not necessarily going to work that way. Subjectively, it could happen, maybe even is likely to happen, that at certain stages there will be even a sense of despair. And that does not in any way indicate that you're doing anything wrong. I would say it actually indicates that you're doing things correctly. Uh, and you ask how would this connect with what I shared today? Uh, so again, whatever it is that you're experiencing, so in this case, mediocrity, as an example, or like it's a faraway fantasy. So those are words that you're using to describe some experience, and you are the creator of your experience, and that's a process. So you can use what I described today to become aware of the process by which you create that experience, and that will allow you to have more subtlety of awareness around it, more awareness of options, and more empowerment. That's my main thought on that. Okay, so somebody says, if a person is routinely going and coming to express disapproval of me, is it true that keeping awareness on one, what is most important to me, and two, the internal process first, helps me by preventing being swept up in the distractions that don't contribute anything? Uh, so if a person is coming to express disapproval of you, um, okay, so let's just break this down. So if so, so under, let's say, maybe generally speaking, so this is a specific example of where you experience something non-optimal, and you experience that non-optimal state as a reaction to a person expressing disapproval of you, or what you perceive as that person expressing disapproval of you. So the trigger is that person saying something. What follows is the process by which you assign meaning to that, and you decide that person is expressing disapproval of me, and everything else that follows. And there's probably something prior to that, but that's an internal process. So externally there's just somebody saying something. That's not a problem. You then take that and turn it into a problem through an internal process. You assign meaning to it. Um, so then you're wondering, is it true that uh, you could help yourself? And I would say yes. And you're wanting to know specifically, is it true that you could help yourself by remaining aware of what's most important to you and being aware of the internal process by which you're creating your experience? And I would say yes to both of those. So you can help yourself by being aware of what's most important to you and the internal process that you're using. And then you're wondering, is that specifically going to help you through the mechanism of preventing being swept up in the distractions that don't contribute anything? That would be one possible mechanism. I think, as I said very early on today, uh, the mechanisms are the mechanisms. You don't even need to know the mechanisms by which the benefits come to you if you just work with these processes that you described. So, what's most important to you, and what's the internal process that you're using to create the experience? So, for example, if you know that what's most important to you is peace, I don't know what's most important to you, but just as an example, if you say, okay, I know what's most important to me is peace, and I'm aware right now that I've just created non-peace for myself. So let me become aware of the process that I use to create non-peace. So just doing that, that's all you need to know. If you just do that, things will shift for you over time. And then as a byproduct, you'll become aware of the mechanisms by which that is occurring. But it really is irrelevant in terms of being able to produce the change. You don't need to know in advance what the mechanisms are. You don't ever need to know what the mechanisms are. The mechanisms will make themselves known to you to the degree that they want to, and that it might be of any interest to you whatsoever, but you really don't need to know them. All that you need to do is just what you described here. Know what's most important to you. Be aware of the internal process. Uh, Somebody once says, please consider publishing your marathon newsletter on compounded effects, as my ridiculous inner teenager has long rebelled against boring, restrictive routines. Uh, listening to and yet listening to you, I am, thank goodness, starting to see my own supposedly free and spontaneous negative habits and even more boring and restrictive, even more boring and restrictive than any routine that might help get me free of my mindless trance. Great. I will consider it. I have been considering it. It's being considered. Thank you for the encouragement. Um, Somebody says, "What's the best method to remove a limiting belief? Is it the rapid resolution?" I already responded to this. I did respond. I responded. I did respond to this earlier. If that's still not clear to you, you can let me know. Okay, just a couple more here, and then I'm gonna wrap up because I'm feeling done. Um, well, maybe that's it. I think that was it. It was amazing. Perfect timing too. I think I got through all of them. I don't think I missed anything. Sometimes there, but I think I'll trust it. We got through all of it. So thank you to all of you. Blessings to you. Take care. Bye for now. See you next time.